One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over.
Hello, welcome to draft season sponsored by the Knicks Wall. I am your host without Jess today, and that is Nick Carannante. And I have a very special guest on with me today, and that is the #1 bachelor at the University of Missouri, Ben Pfeifer. Ben, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm never gonna live that one down, am I?
You should be proud of it. I think you should.
I am. I did it to myself. I knew what I was getting into.
Well, I'm very happy to have Ben on, and we are going to be talking mostly about the bigs in this year's draft class. And there's a couple guys that I brought Ben specifically on to talk about. But before we do, I'm going to talk about somebody that you've heard me talk about ad nauseum before, maybe to the chagrin of Jess and the other co-hosts we have had on. And I know this is someone that Ben loves talking about as well. So because we are for the Knicks Wall and we do want to keep a little Knicks focus today, we're going to start with Sharif Cooper. Ben,
Yes.
Tell the audience why Sharif Cooper is the best possible draft pick for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, Sharif is the dream, right? I mean, like, I don't think they're probably not going to be in a position to get him. No, I mean, they pick at 19 and 21 right now. I think he'd probably be worth moving up for if you have to. Sharif, I mean, Knicks in desperate need of a long-term point guard option. And Sharif is one of the best in the class. He is the best passer in the class, probably the best ball handler. His slashing craft for a guy that small is so special. Obviously, you know, the issues with him, like his defense and his shot and his overall scoring, which I definitely am worried about. But like elevator pitch, like you're not going to find a better, you know, creator in all facets of the game than Sharif, maybe in this draft entirely. And like, you know, that's a thing, even if there's a lot of downside that I think you need to take a swing on. Especially for a team like the Knicks who just desperately need that kind of thing on their roster.
I was about to add, this is a Knicks franchise that has very, very little long-term point guard play in their history, right? Since, you know, decades and decades have gone by since the Knicks have had a long-term point guard option. And it's something they've been looking for in basically every era of modern Knicks basketball. It is not something that has gotten better. This year's team was desperately in need of that, starting Elfrid Payton. And there are potential options that you could pursue, the dream, you know, sign and trade, free agency kind of guys, your Chris Paul, your Kyle Lowry. But when you're looking at a long-term option, I don't see a better option than Sharif Cooper. I had we recorded with Ignacio Risotto on International Prospects last week, and a question was asked of me, and I'm going to ask it to you now, which is, would you rather the Knicks trade up a bigger package to take Josh Giddey, or stay at 19 or just trade up a couple of spots to take Sharif Cooper?
I guess it depends on what you give up. I do like Giddey a decent bit more, but I also think Sharif might fit what the Knicks need more, because like I think you really need someone who can generate consistent rim pressure, which I think Giddey is going to be able to do eventually, but Sharif is going to do from day one, and you know it's probably always going to be better at than Giddey. And like the Knicks have guys in place who can be really effective, like secondary and play finishers, like RJ. Quickly, Randall's gonna have his shot making, even like maybe Obi, even though I'm not super an Obi guy, but he can really play finish, you know, when you need him to. But yeah, I think because you're gonna have to give up less, I'd probably just say Sharif, even though I do love Giddey a lot.
And I know you do. That's why I wanted to talk about it. We're not going to talk Giddey today. We talked about him last time, but worth bringing up in that sort of context. So we are going to move on and talk about the bigs in this class, some of which are realistic Knicks targets, and we'll talk about that because I really don't like a couple of them for the Knicks, and they're consistently mocked for it. And some of them are not even going to be in the ballpark, but they're worth talking about just as a whole. So just kind of looking at the whole kind of first round lens of bigs, and we'll start with another guy that we've talked about briefly, not in the Knicks conversation at all, but that is Evan Mobley.
Yeah, Mobley is awesome. I mean, I think he's, one of the clear two best prospects in this class. Like, I don't think he's better than Cade, but I definitely understand the case for it. Just a really special defensive prospect. One of the best easily the best one I've ever studied. And, I don't have complete information, but I'd have to guess one of the best in the last, decade or two. I can't see that many being better. Just so incredibly complete and elite on defense. And then has real potential on offense, along with his obvious, scalable traits that work next to other stars, for some, secondary scoring, even like offensive number two upside. So he's like a perfect modern big, so versatile on both ends with real high end upsides. Like, you really can't go wrong with him. And like, he is worth, pushing your chips in, like, if you're a team that, can get that.
He really is. And I just wanted to talk about him briefly because he is so clear cut, to me, the second best prospect in this class. And he's in a league of his own when it comes to the bigs in this class. And there is this anti-big sort of bias that you see because of the modern NBA and taking a big. And I don't understand it at all when it comes to Evan Mobley, who is, to me, the most ideal version of a big you can take for the modern NBA. But it's just something I wanted to touch on briefly because he's just worth talking about at every opportunity. He is going to be, I think, just an absolute monster immediately defensively. And that's not something you can say, especially for bigs who do typically have a longer sort of transition to the NBA defensively. I think he's just that immediately.
Yeah, Mobley just isn't going to have that like struggle curve. Like, he is like, he's not like a fouler. Like, he has like almost, I think he fouled like twice a game, which is so rare, to be that low for young bigs, especially one who block shots as much as he does. Just so smart. Like, yes, he's gonna have some issues with the stronger guys, but even can make up for that with his length and his quick leaping and his timing. So yeah, I mean, Mobley's gonna be fantastic right away. And as he continues to adapt to the league, like, he can guard in every pick and roll coverage. Like, you have to have bigs who can play at the level of the screen, and they totally can. As my pal and Knicks fan Jake Rosen likes to say, if you can't play at the level of the screen, you are food, and that is true in the modern NBA. And Mobley obviously can do that. He can switch it. He can switch, hedge if needed, drop, of course. So he's just going to be so useful in every way on defense. He's the type of playoff big that you need. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I just think there's so much ignorance in that bias. That's like, you don't want to draft a player you can't play in the playoffs as this sort of catch-all negative towards bigs when he is the exact player you want in the playoffs. So I just wanted to get that out.
Jokic was like one of the best. I mean, Jokic won MVP and was like arguably the best player in the playoffs until he eliminated, as was Embiid, and they are both centers who like aren't untraditional movers. So like great bigs are not going away. Like, and they matter. Like,
I think they matter. And you make a case with how those teams are built, and there's some things that need to change on, I think, both of those teams, but they are built around a big in a way that shows that can be successful.
I mean, like, the team that is likely going to win the finals, like the Suns have a number one overall pick big on their team. Like, obviously Ayton is not like the level of like Jokic and Embiid or Giannis, but like, he still was number one overall pick. Like, there's no reason to shy away from Mobley because he's a big. Like, that's just silly.
So let's move on, and I want to ask your opinion. Mobley is clear cut the number one big in this draft class. Who is your number two big?
That's a good question. Yeah, there's definitely a fall off. I think you could almost call like Scotty Barnes a pseudo big, but like, I'm not going to include him here. He number two. So my number two big is like currently Kai Jones, but it's like extremely neck and neck between him and Garuba for my second big in the class.
Interesting. Let's talk Kai Jones, because I think he's a very interesting prospect. He's a prospect I like quite a bit, but I do think there's some some variance in how he's projected and how people feel about him. So go ahead and start with your thoughts on Kai Jones.
Yeah, Kai is a guy whose flashes have caught the intrigue of pretty much everyone who's seen them, and they are quite ridiculous, like the pull-up shots and the drives, and and some of the defensive plays. But I think like his offensive upside is what I like about him. Like his fluidity is unbelievable. Like the way he can dip his shoulder low and like really like get low and bursting on drives makes me believe like there is something to develop him there as like a legitimate like wing attacker in spots maybe. And then like defensively with his mobility, his ability to cover ground, like guard screens on the perimeter, make rotations for blocks, really enticing stuff. And with that mobility, there comes the pick and roll defense for versatility potential, which we talked about with Evan Mobley. But the issue with Kai is he is just extremely raw in basically every way. Like he is like 2 or 3 years away at this point for sure. I guess like because he got the hype. I was not like I wouldn't have expected him to come out this year. If he didn't get the hype he did. He just like offensively like has no real big man skills. Like his screening, rolling, finishing around the rim, all of that needs work. His passing is underwhelming. Though there are like flashes of like off dribble passes, which people have seen, and like I think those matter a little bit, but the consistency is not there. And then defensively, like he makes up for it with his tools at this level, but just his rotational instincts, his technique, guarding on the interior without fouling, guarding on the perimeter, like again, like the switching flashes are awesome, but I think what's more important is to look at like the bad moments and like what is raw and what's going to get exposed at the next level, at least early in his career. So yeah, I'm not like crazy high on Kai. Like I have him in like the mid-teens, which is I think decently high. I think some definitely have him higher, but he is a really really good upsidey kind of swing in that range. Definitely, like you said, a lot of variance with him, a high range of outcomes, but there definitely is a very good player in Kai Jones, and I think with some creativity and astute development, you could potentially make something really special out of him if you're doing it right. But yeah, there's a definite downside.
Just a little context to what you're saying with the numbers. He really is a prospect that is built on potential. And as you said, those kind of flashes. It is not the production that we saw. That is why anybody is going to draft him. Average just under 9 points a game. He did shoot 39% from three, but again, really low volume. Ultimately, just all of his numbers were pretty low in productivity, and the flashes are what's there. The raw talent upside is what's there. He's an interesting prospect. He is someone that, like, I was looking at John Hollinger's list of 70 prospects today, which I'm not going to talk about too much because I have a lot of thoughts on it. But I think he had Kai Jones at like 32. He had him out of the top 30. And I don't think that's that uncommon just in how high you see him. And you see him at 6 or 7 on other boards.
Yeah.
Just a very interesting prospect that is very raw, and I think situational context will matter in development where he's drafted. Yeah,
exactly. Definitely. I think you need a team that's going to be patient with him and give him the right kind of reps and just develop him, be willing to think outside the box from him.
So let's talk about someone who you said you had right below Kai Jones, and that is someone that is a little more realistic to be there for the Knicks. And I know some Knicks fans, myself included, would love him there at 19 or 21, and that's Usman Garuba.
Yeah, Garuba is really good. He is one of the better defensive prospects in this class. If he was 2 inches taller, he would contend with Mobley for the best. I mean, he'd be a truly elite defensive prospect. Unfortunately, is not. And, given that his best defensive skills are center skills, like his short area change of direction, his recognition on interior rotations is absurd. It definitely, he's, the size is going to be an issue, but I mean, I think maybe even like look at developing his defense as a wing kind of, because he is, he's not the quickest laterally and, going to struggle with quicker guards and wings, but he's so strong, and the way he uses his hands and arms to defend on defense without fouling, stabbing at guys and making them uncomfortable is masterful. So I think there's room for that. The team defense is spectacular. Like the movement is really like, it's so efficient, and he just covers ground, especially in short spaces so well. So, that'll lend well for, pick and roll defenses. backside rotation. So the defense, amazing. But the issue with him is just like, what does he do on offense? Because, Garuba, like a 6'9" center, going to struggle as a roll man because of that. He's currently not a shooter. I think he's probably going to be a fine enough catch and shooter, but I don't know how much that matters really, because he doesn't have any perimeter skill to attack closeout. His saving grace is definitely his passing. He's a really quick decision maker, pretty much no processing delay. Making extra passes on the roll. I definitely think there's utilization there, but it will require a specific team context and a specific type of defensive coverage to really attack. But like looking for like a defensive specialist big, I think there's definitely value in Garuba. Like I have him again, like in that mid-teens range, but I could definitely rationalize a team going higher if they really think they can capitalize on his development, because there are some really special defensive tools there.
And he is, again, as you said, a 6'9" center, but he does have a 7'3" wingspan. He is a physical specimen in a way that would negate a little bit of that, but yeah, the height is still going to be a concern. He's a very interesting prospect to me. Again, one that the defensive floor I think is so high that he's really a worthwhile prospect to me. I want to talk about somebody who is another European prospect and different in basically every possibility from Garuba. And that is, again, someone we talked about a little bit last time with Ignacio, but I want to get your opinions on Alperen Sengun.
Yeah, Sengun, he's good. I'm not a huge Sengun fan, at least relative to some people who, have him quite high. Like he, his production and age in Europe and the Turkish league is undeniable, and I think that matters. But where I struggle is when you think about translation and his scalability and what he actually does in the league, and how he develops into that player. Offensively, like obviously he's an incredible post scorer, like that is phenomenal for his age. But like, is he going to be a guy who's regularly getting efficient post up touches in the league? Like, I would be surprised, just because that's not really how the modern NBA works, outside of a very few notable exceptions. And then, if he's not getting those high volume post up touches, I'm just not sure what he's doing on offense. Because as a roll man, like I don't think he's going to be a good enough finisher because of his lack of size and physical tools and vertical athleticism and strength. The passing is good. I think everyone's seen that like crazy behind the back pass in transition, but I definitely think that's a little disingenuous, like using that as a barometer of his passing. Like he's a pretty quick decision maker, makes solid extra passes, one mores out of the post, some short roll stuff, DHOs, but nothing spectacular. Like, he's not as good as a lot of the other like tall passers in this class, like, Scotty Barnes, Jaylen Johnson, Rocco Percacci, in that mold. I mean, still some utility passer. And then if he's, currently not a shooter, like I've seen a lot of people be pretty optimistic about his shooting. And while I think he can definitely get to a point where he's fine on catch and shoots like Garuba, like I don't think like someone, people who I've seen like Kevin Love comparisons, which like is just kind of ridiculous. Like you have to do a lot of projecting to think he'll get to that level of shooter. Like one of the better big man shooters of the era, Kevin Love, given his longevity and his roles.
And the other thing we talked about on our International Prospects podcast was the comparison to Jokic, which is out there and just shouldn't be, can't be.
Yeah.
Can't compare anyone to Nikola
Jokic is an outlier.
Yeah.
I've watched a little bit of like pre-college Jokic, and like he was just a different level and like passing, and like you could definitely see like some of the superstar potential there. Or like Sengun's just not that. And then like defensively, while he has his traits like some movement ability in short areas and ground coverage and rotational instincts, it's just like a 6'9" non-vertical center who's not that mobile. Like it's just he's going to struggle at the highest level on defense.
And
so
this is unlike a lot of the prospects we're talking about today who are being drafted and on that sort of potential and those flashes. Sengun is being drafted basically off his productivity because of how impactful he was, and in a good league in Turkey. It is appealing to a lot of people. And again, you see him, I've seen him in top 5 on boards. Hollander had him at 4. I don't see it at that level at all. But he's a guy that you see teams talking themselves into 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the argument that gets thrown out is like, oh, you know, guys that good, that young in Europe don't fail. And while that, you know, that might be true, I think it's just, you know, you're being disingenuous if you're using that and not doing the work, like, because like you can't do the argument without the context, you know, without understanding that like every prospect situation is unique and has the chance to be different from the ones before it. Obviously, using priors is important in queries and stuff, but I think it's too much of a be all end all for some people, in my opinion, especially in the case of Şengün, right? There's a lot of limiting factors. I do think he could definitely be a good NBA player. You know, a team that uses him creatively could get the most out of him in his development. And like, I think he's like, that's worth like a, you know, mid late first round pick somewhere in the 20s. I'll probably have him a little later on my board, but I could, you know, rationalize that area. But again, like not a lot of your top 10 pick to me.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The next guy I want to talk about is someone that is fairly consistently mocked to the Knicks. And this is not a player that I would like to see the Knicks take at 19 whatsoever. And that is Jaylen Johnson.
I think that's actually pretty decent value. I don't love Jaylen Johnson either. I think he's all right. I think you're like, the Knicks kind of already have like their limited offensive big that they drafted last year. Like Jaylen Johnson, yes, like the passing is spectacular in certain areas of the floor, transition, semi-transition, high post to cutters, you know, all that. And then, you know, his speed and, you know, explosion in short in long spaces. And then, you know, and then some of the defensive upside with his, you know, his quick leaping and some of the rotational instincts and mobility. But there's like, what does he do on offense when he can't pass? Because like he can't score in the half court on the ball, at least. Like the shot isn't there. He can't get by anybody. He's not an incredible tough finisher or anything. I think, you know, strength and improving his handle, it's all possible, but I think he's just too stiff. And then defensively, like he currently just like does not know how to play defense despite the tools. So there's a ton of variance there, I think. And I mean, I understand being high on Jaylen. Like if you really think the upside is there, I just don't think the offensive upside is what I maybe once thought it was. So that's why I'm lower. Like I think it's more like high-end offensive utility big than like real star big, or even like wing creator type, which, you know, I think there was some hope that he could, you know, fulfill in college or pre-college. And I definitely think there was maybe some evidence of that. But yeah, I mean, I like Jaylen Johnson, solid enough in that range. I think he's a worthwhile swing. There's going to be other guys I'd prefer, but I definitely get a team taking him there because I think there is real upside.
I think relative to the Knicks context, I do hate Jaylen Johnson at like 9 or 10, which I think you have some people have him there. I don't hate Jaylen Johnson at 20. I hate him for the Knicks because, as you mentioned, you know, a kind of one-dimensional offensive player who isn't a consistent shooter and doesn't play defense is kind of what they took last year.
Yeah, I mean, he is more extreme. You know, I'd say, I don't know. No, he's probably a better defense. No, he's definitely a better defensive prospect than OB, like by a mile. More, maybe a little less extreme, but yeah, I mean, similar concepts.
You know what I mean, right? With Julius Randle already there, with Obi Toppin already there, I struggle to see a fit with Jaylen Johnson, even if I did think he was a good fit for a Thibodeau team, which I don't for a couple different reasons.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me for New York. I mean, though, like if you think he's BPA, you take him regardless of fit, but, you know, assuming you don't, which we don't, I agree with you. Yeah.
And there are plenty of drafts where I've seen these two prospects at 19 and 21, and this would be a pretty mind-boggling draft to me. So I want your opinion, and that would be, I've seen Jaylen Johnson at 19 and then Isaiah Jackson at 21.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense to me. I'm also not huge on Jackson. All of him outside of my first round. I definitely understand, like, there's real defensive upside there, I think. Like his length and his vertical explosion and like his second jump and, you know, some of the rim protection flashes, even the movement flashes are really encouraging. But the question is, like, he's kind of like a more like a less good, more vertically explosive Garuba. to me, because like the same question is, what does he do on offense? Because Jackson, like I think the same chance of shooting spot ups as someone like Aruba, like it's possible. More chance of being a roll man because he's could be a very he's an explosive above the rim finisher, but he's like still small. He's like 6'8" or 6'9", which is, and again, like that just doesn't work at center. He doesn't have any perimeter skills pretty much. I do think maybe there's hope because when he played with LaMelo at Spire, there definitely was some more flashes of ball handling and passing when he had that really elite creator next to him. So, maybe in the league, playing next to a guy like that could unlock some more offensive skill, but I think that's all very theoretical at this point. But I mean, like unlike Garuba, like Ajax just like doesn't really know how to play at this point, or like where Garuba's a technician on the defensive end, Ajax can be very spacey. But I mean, the tools are real. I think he could definitely be a worthwhile gamble. He's definitely, but that high, and again like coupled with Jaylen, it wouldn't make a lot of sense unless you think they're both like really strong BPA, which seems unlikely.
Yeah, and that's something I've talked about with my co-host Jess as being our worst case scenario, and I've seen that in more than one mocks, and it's doesn't make any sense to me. But I do think one of those two is a pretty realistic target if the Knicks keep both of those picks. And I think it's important to think about those players with specific context because they both are a little, I don't know if raw would be the word.
I'd say that's fair.
But they're not guys that, if the Knicks draft Sharife Cooper, he's getting minutes next year and he's producing. And that's the expectation, right? If they draft one of those two, I struggle to think either of those players are going to be able to help the Knicks immediately.
Yeah, probably not. At least not in a really significant way.
Right, which is, again, something we saw last year from Obi Toppin, who had some moments in the playoffs, but ultimately was not a super productive rookie season. And drafting another player that would kind of fit into that mold, let alone with the potential fit. Now the Knicks do have a lot of flexibility with what they could do. I think one of those three picks could look for that type of Nerlens Noel rim runner backup 5 type. And those I think are options. Now, not that Jaylen Johnson's that, but they could be looking at. I don't know. I think it's interesting where these guys fall. A lot of projection on all of these prospects. And a lot of projection on this last guy I want to talk about, and that is teammate of Kai Jones, Greg Brown.
Yeah, Greg Brown is, I think, more interesting than he gets credit for being. Like he, yes, is like the nuclear athlete that everyone knows. Like run jump athleticism is pretty unmatched. Like his second jump is unbelievable. Everyone knows about like the dunking and some of like the strength he showcases. But like his shooting projection is really interesting to me because his shooting volume is absurd. There was a point earlier in the year when he was taking about 15 threes per 100, which is just like an incomprehensible number for a guy like Greg. He's a confident catch and shooter, which I love to see in a young guy. And I do think the shooting projection is really solid for him. It's just, again, like Kai and like a lot of the players we talked about, like Ajax. Jaylen Johnson in some circumstances, just like knowing how to play is a big issue. Feel for the game on both ends. Offensively, the assist to turnover ratio extremely low. Though I think he has some moments as an off-ball passer with his court mapping and awareness and some extra passes. But again, like especially when he's on ball, like can really be a black hole. And then just, I think he definitely has some burst as a closeout attacker. The handle is really basic, rudimentary, and can finish, with his explosion and, using his length. And then defensively, similarly, using that vertical explosion. But I think like the thing with Greg Brown that like makes me just like not rank him very high at all is I'm so worried about his medicals because Greg Brown, as pointed out, I think first by my pal Polar Fall, genius. Greg Brown has like a leg imbalance where like one of his legs is shorter than the other one. And like I can never remember which one it is, but it's obvious on tape when you watch it. Like if it's pointed out to you and you go back and watch Brown again after having watched him before, like you'll immediately notice it. And like he just looks so wobbly. Like every step he takes, it looks like his legs are gonna snap, especially when he jumps and especially when he dribbles, like and tries to change direction, and he just buckles and loses balance. I worry about how that impacts his flexibility in terms of ball handling development, his defense in terms of in perimeter mobility, and it's really unfortunate that that is as worrying as it is to me, because I think Brown is interesting, like as a play finishing off wing with catch and shoots, cuts, lobs, close out attack, finish, and then defensively as like a weak side rim protector with maybe some positional versatility, like 3.5 to 4.5. Yeah, I mean, if I'm wrong about the medical thing and Brown ends up being fine, and a P3 strength and conditioning staff can really get his lower body and his core under wraps and improve that, then I think there's definitely a good NBA player in Greg Brown. But right now I'm just a little worried about too much to be super in on him. But he's definitely an interesting swing, and someone I enjoy and I'm rooting for sure.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting prospect, and I think you can argue that there's a more upside swing than there would be with a guy like Isaiah Jackson. And that's interesting. Again, not someone that I necessarily would like to see the Knicks target, but I think a very interesting prospect because of a lot of the things you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And the last player I want to talk about here, and this is someone that we talked about again last week, I wrote about, but I know you're high on him, so I just want to get some of your insight, and that is Roko Prkačin. Yes,
I figured this was coming. Yeah, I love Rocco. I'm pretty sure Ignacio does as well. Shout out Ignacio.
Shout out to Ignacio forever, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good friend of the pod.
Great guy. Good pal. Yeah, Rocco's awesome. I mean, I've said this like on every pod I've been on, but it's just confusing to me that he's been so lost by the mainstream, because he's like the exact type of guy they like because he dunks on everybody and his highlight tape is absurd. But like his MO is very much like a guy like Poku. It's just like do cool shit and kill people. Like that's what Rocco wants to do every time he touches the basketball, and it's amazing. Like beyond just being super fun, I think that's like the correct wiring for his development, because like he's far from a black hole. Like he's a really smart passer, has a little processing delay, but he has flashes, live dribble passing, extra passes, one more, short roll stuff, DHOs. It's versatile. The slashing and finishing. He's not even as good of an athlete as his highlight tape make you think, because he is a little clunky in terms of his load up. He's less great in short spaces than big spaces, which definitely matters. But just versatile offense, dribble, pass, and I think shoot. The shot is a work in progress now, but it's improved, and his indicators in terms of volume and versatility at this age are strong. And defensively, just like really smart, mobile, though his technique and footwork needs cleaning up. But he is 18, playing in a good pro league, the Adriatic.
I believe he is the youngest player in this class. If not, he's on a very short list.
I think second to Josh Primo. But yeah, he's November 2002, like, or I think the 26th of November 2002. Yes, I've memorized Rocco's birthday. But I'm going to be sending him a gift. I am only maybe kidding. But yeah, I mean, just like versatile combo forward, so good. Like he doesn't get the Şengün treatment for like being really good in a good league, in a better league at a young age. Obviously, he didn't win MVP of that league or anything, and he doesn't have the counting stats. But like I think you can make an argument that he was similarly impactful in a lot of ways. But
I find it very interesting personally that those two are, I think most major media people have Şengün higher, and I've never really seen any case the other way.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it, outside of in like the mainstream. It doesn't really exist, that case.
Which is very interesting to me, because I think that case is very, very, very clear to make. Now they're very different players, so it's not a 1-to-1 comparison. But just looking at some of that, specifically skills that translate, I think it's a very valid point to make that the projection for Prokachin would be higher in the NBA level.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I certainly think so. Yeah, Rocco's great, and like he's gonna fall to like 30, which is a freaking crime. So.
And also from all we know, and this is something that we talked with Ignacio about, like I do expect him to come over. Unlike Jokibitis, who we talked about last week, who won't be coming over.
Favorite of mine, absolutely.
I do expect Rocco to come over immediately, which is interesting. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if the Knicks go Euro with one of those picks. It might be Jokibitis, specifically to stash, if they keep all three of them.
Yeah, you can probably get Rocco at 32, honestly.
And that would be my personal board. And here, let's just go this. We talked about all the specific players I want to talk about. Just gonna ask a couple Knicks questions here. It's like, where would you want, or what would you be targeting if you're the Knicks with those three picks? Because I would love something like that, where you target a guard and a shooter with 19 and 21, and then you take someone like Rocco at 32.
Yeah, I mean, like Sharif, obviously the number one target, if he's there. I'm just like looking at Tankathon. Tankathon has them going Zaire, Sharif, and Jacob, Josh Christopher, and like that would be a really good outcome to me. Like I like all three of those picks in all three of those spots. Those three would be kind of ideal. I don't know if he falls there, but I think Trey Mann, if he's around 19 to 21, you definitely go for Trey Mann if you can't get Sharif. Would be strongly advocating for Jared Butler around there if it wasn't for his medicals, which is really unfortunate because Jared Butler is awesome and fun and a good guy. So it's unfortunate that that's probably going to disqualify him. Bones Highland, similarly, I would love to see him in that range. And then looking a little further back at 32, I like Rocco Prokachin. I'm just looking at like JT Thor. If he's going to fall that far, I doubt it. Like Kessler Edwards is another 3-and-D wingy type. Deuce McBride I like a lot as well. And then even like Tankathon is back here, like Josh Christopher I think would be a really good swing in the second round as well. So
yeah, I've said it on this podcast and I'll keep saying it until the draft. If the Knicks keep all three of those picks, I would like to see specifically the 1921, but even with that 32, take one of them, a more high upside guy, take somebody that is a little more solid, high floor, somebody that can contribute, and then take somebody that might be a higher upside. That's what I would like to see personally. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they probably don't make all three picks because, teams with that many picks just tend to either consolidate or like move out. But I mean, I definitely think that there are going to be good values for them as, I think this range of the draft, like 17 to like 24 is kind of like a money range as it was last year, like where we saw guys like Tyrese Maxey, hilariously, and RJ Hampton and Poku fall. Where I think, this year we're going to get guys like Jaden Springer Springer is my number one option if he's there. But he's, in any very unlikely. But that range, you're going to have Springer, Sharif, Zaire, Trey Mann, like Rocco. So like that's a really strong range to be in. And, having two picks in there like the Knicks do, like I think they're set up quite well.
Fit be damned. Jaden Springer, Sharif Cooper. That's what I want.
That's honestly like an extremely cool backcourt pairing. I mean, you probably want to pair them with like some very good shooters.
Which
I think both of them like
none of.
I mean, like quickly, but
sure.
I mean, again, like that's I mean, that would be a fun pairing. I mean, just like the rim pressure you can generate out of those two is just. Like, yeah.
Sure. Sharif is interesting. And again, I love Sharif. I want the Knicks to take Sharif. A backcourt with Sharif and Emmanuel Quickley on it at the same time would be interesting defensively.
Really, really damn fun offensively, though.
To say the least, but it'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I would be pretty shocked if the Knicks take all 3 of those picks. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they move up, which, depending on who they target, could be hit or miss for me. But maybe you do see someone like Giddey fall and they move up for him. I think that's the little we know of Leon Rose. I think we can expect him to be aggressive and go target his guy. And he moved a lot in the draft last year. It's going to be very interesting, but I think you're right. This is a loaded draft class. Everybody's talked about the top of the draft and that top 4, but I do think it's a really deep draft, and I think there's a lot of really solid prospects in the middle of the class, and there's a bunch of guys that should be available for the Knicks, and that's a really fun opportunity having 3 picks and being able to take advantage of when guys fall.
Yeah, certainly could have worse drafts to have lots of picks.
Yeah, absolutely. Like last year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Last year for sure.
Anything else before I let you go?
No, I think we covered
Any takes you want to get off, Knicks related, draft related, just anything you want out there?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely going to be an important offseason and draft for the Knicks. After exceeding expectations this year, how do they take that next step and not be, a team that's treading water and this, the 5, 6, 7, 8 seed for the next, 7 years?
It's a good question. We will see, but thank you so much for coming on. Go ahead and plug anything you want to plug. Where can people find you?
Just follow me on Twitter. At Ben_Pfeifer_. I'll be posting, draft clips and voice notes and assorted things until the time of the draft and afterwards. So yeah, just give me a follow. That's about it.
Great follow. Absolutely. Go ahead and do that. As always, I'm Nick Carannante. You follow me at not the fake NC with an appropriate amount of underscores in between them. And go ahead. I don't have anything new out, but if I do, I'll let you know. Follow the Knicks Wall, which I assume you do if you're listening to this, but some really good draft coverage that's been coming out. So stay locked in, and we'll see you next time when Jess is back.